On a damaged ship, a living man could be more dangerous than a dead one. Black water slapped the hull of Elias Kane's launch and threw cold spray across Mara Voss's face. Ahead, the Aster Crown sagged under red emergency flicker. A crippled inspection vessel with her bow lights dead and her stern riding wrong for mate. The distress call had been real. Mara had heard enough of it before they cast off lower deck emergency. Crew resistance. Mara had heard enough tea. Route pressure from Brine ledger before the beacon went hot. Not a fake call. Not a clean accident either. The nearest official rescue lights were still miles out, too slow against the corridor tension that made every vessel hesitate. Mara kept 2 fingers hooked in Rook's harness as the Malinois stood braced beside her, ears flat, body hard as cable. He was not watching the deck line. He was looking below it, into the skin of the ship, where red light leaked through vents and open seams. "Too long," Elias said from the wheel. "We wait. They drown. We don't rush into someone else's route," Mara said. A muted crack moved across the water from the Aster Crown's upper metal, and one red lamp winked out near the forward rail. Her knee tightened as the launch rose and dropped in shay. Old pain, familiar warning. She ignored the first bite and watched the Aster Crown's steel bite. Fuel rode the air under the salt. The vessel had that wrong silence. Damaged ships carried after people stopped trusting the lights and started trusting touch. A loose cable snapped against a stanchion. A red strip along the rail blinked twice and died halfway, making the access points appear and vanish. Rook's nose moved once, then stopped. His body went still in the ugly way that meant living human stress, not a clean scent trail. Not a name, not truth. Just pressure below deck. Mara felt Elias angle the launch closer than he should have. He wanted speed. He always wanted speed when someone might be trapped inside metal. That impulse had saved people. It had also walked men into spaces other men had prepared. Mara did not look away from the first ladder she could see. It hung too straight against a vessel that had no business offering straight lines. The cleanest thing in a broken place was often the first lie. She let that thought pass through once, then turned it into distance, timing, and hands. Time. The other craft appeared off the starboard dark without rescue lights and without the 20 pied. Sloppy correction of a civilian boat fighting chop. It moved low and quiet, cutting the wake instead of fighting it. Trimmed to arrive beside the Aster Crown before any official hull could claim the scene, Mara saw it between 2 pulses of red emergency light. A darker shape sliding where nothing official should have been yet. Her hand tightened on Rook's harness. Rook did not bark. He shifted his weight toward the crippled ship, then dragged his attention back down. Split between the living stress below and the wrong movement on the water. Elias saw the craft too. His jaw changed. "That's not rescue. Picture." "No," Mara said. "It's early." Early was worse than loud. Early meant someone had counted the same minutes she had and reached the answer first. Another hard tick snapped from the Aster Crown's rail. Close enough for a faint spark to jump and die in the wind. She could wait for official lights and let the first people aboard shape the ship around whoever was alive below. Or she could board without enough certainty. Certainty had killed people before. Waiting had done it with clean hands. Elias brought the launch in hard enough to scrape paint. Mara caught the wet rail, felt cold bite through her glove, and hauled herself up before the launch settled. Her knee jolted on the first step and sent heat up her thigh. She kept the sound behind her teeth. Rook came after her, lean and controlled, nails scraping metal. Then landed beside her with his head already turning toward lower access. Elias climbed behind them with a line over one shoulder and a curse under his breath. The deck smelled of salt, fuel, old heat, and something coppery that rain had not washed away. Mara held up one hand and made Elias freeze with her. The first ladder dropped into red dark below. Two open, two ready. Elias leaned toward it. Behind Mara, he stopped breathing through his mouth. Mara caught his sleeve before speed could make the choice for him. Not yet. Rook moved toward the ladder, stopped, and refused with his whole body, shoulders locked and paws dug into wet steel. He gave no answer beyond that refusal. Mara accepted it anyway. The unauthorized craft slid closer on the black water. The ship seemed to listen with them in the dark. Its engine fell away, and then the craft cut its lights. Mara did not move down the ladder. She moved sideways along the wet rail, away from the obvious drop, and felt Elias's frustration follow her like heat. Rook stayed tight against her left leg, breathing hard through his nose. Eyes cutting between the red dark lower access and the black water where the unauthorized craft had vanished into its own silence. A thump came from the outer hull, soft and controlled, then another. Men came aboard the way professionals entered bad rooms. With no wasted metal noise and no hurry, they could not own a tu sauve. Mara saw the first shadow rise near the bridge access, then the second, both low against the broken shape of the deck. Their clothes carried no rescue color. Their movement carried no confusion. Brine Ledger had reached the Aster Crown inside the same response gap she had time. They were not here to search. They were here to shape the ship before anyone honest arrived. The deck rolled under Mara's boots, slick with salt, fuel, and rain. And every broken red flash changed the distance by a foot in Mara's eyes. A sharp impact cracked into the bridge frame above them and threw flakes of paint into the wind. "Bridge," Elias said. He had one hand on the rail and the other pointed upward, impatience written into his shoulders. We lose the vessel." Mara saw the same thing and rejected the simple version. The bridge door hung half open under a strip of red light, too important to leave, too obvious to love. One operator moved for it while another held lower angle, not spraying noise, not shouting. Not acting like the kind of fool who made stories easier. They wanted access. They wanted route control. Another hard strike punched the emergency panel beside the bridge and blew the red light into glass dust. The hit did not chase them from the bridge. It moved them off the straight line to it, one bad step closer to the lower hatch. Elias caught the rail, and Mara felt the choice narrow before the sound finished ringing. Rook jerked toward the lower darkness at the same moment the deck ahead flashed white. Mara pushed Elias back with her forearm and took the bridge line first. The nearest man turned toward her, and she put him into the rail hard enough to shake rust loose. His shoulder hit, hers followed, and wet steel slammed through her bones. Her bad knee twisted when the deck shifted under both of them. Pain flashed white and mean. She kept her weight over it anyway. The operator recovered fast, chin tucked, hands working to free space rather than win pride. He was not trying to kill the moment in front of him. He was buying a door he did not yet own. Rook barked once, sharp and cut short, then drove his head toward the lower darkness. Not a command. Not an answer. A warning. Something moved below them, under the bridge fight and the louder metal. A human scrape where there should have been only damaged ship. Elias heard Rook and looked down. That's where they are. That's where someone is, Mara said. She drove her boot against a loose hatch edge, not to break anything, just to make the man in front of her choose balance over the bridge door. He did. That half-second kept the immediate takeover from happening. A rail beside Elias jumped under another impact. And he ducked with Vale not even found yet, but already owning his conscience. The second operator did not chase her. He shifted, watched Rook, watched Elias, leaning toward the lower way, and Mara hated how cleanly he understood the split. They were testing what she protected, bridge or below. Control or life? A simple choice, which meant it was probably built to punish the first honest answer. She gave ground by inches, not steps, keeping the bridge door in the corner of her sight while moving between the lower access and the men. Elias stepped toward the lower access. Mara caught him by the back of his jacket and hauled him short as a hard metallic knock carried up from below. 3 uneven strikes through the deck. Not random. Not ship noise. A voice followed it, buried under steel and water, too faint for words, but human enough to change the air. It hit Mara harder than a clean signal would have, because broken sounds did not ask permission before becoming responsibility. Rook surged, then checked himself against Mara's grip, body trembling with the need to go down. The bridge door was still half open. Brine Ledger still had men on the deck. Official rescue was still too far out. And the dark water beside the Aster Crown held a craft with its lights dead. Mara let the bridge go from perfect control to contested space. She hated the cost as soon as she chose it. The nearest operator used the opening to slide closer to the bridge threshold. Exactly as she expected, and exactly as she could not stop without abandoning the sound below. "We hold the way down," she said. Elias looked ready to argue. Then the knock came again from below, slower this time, desperate enough to count. Mara took the second knock as permission and moved before Elias could turn urgency into noise. The lower access dropped into heat, red flicker, and the sour mix of diesel, salt, blood, and something chemical that made Rook's nose break rhythm. The ladder shook under her boot. Her knee answered with a hot pulse, but the sound below came again, weaker now, and pain became background. Elias came after her with one hand on the rail and the other ready Elias to catch Rook if the dog slipped. The lower engine spaces opened around them in broken layers, damaged panels hanging loose, low steam crawling under red light. Pipes sweating into shallow black water. Rook hit the deck first and locked hard toward the far bulkhead. Then his head snapped sideways, confused by the stink. He took 3 steps, stopped, sneezed once, and looked back at Mara as if the whole room had lied at the same time. Useful, not reliable. Mara hated the seconds that cost Ain 10. Above them, metal answered metal. Someone was moving down another way, patient enough to be worse than panic. The sound had spacing in it, deliberate and unhurried. A man using the ship instead of fighting it. "There," Elias said, already pushing past her. Mara caught his sleeve and pointed 2 fingers low. Fast was fine until fast became blind. Behind a bent maintenance panel, a man had wedged himself between a pump housing and a collapsed rail. His coveralls were torn at the shoulder, his face gray, under the broken strobe. One hand gripped the rail so hard his fingers had split. He tried to crawl away when he saw them, which told Mara almost as much as his uniform patch did. Dr. Owen Vale was not waiting to be rescued. He was afraid of being moved. "Easy," Elias said, too quickly. "We're getting you out." Vale shook his head hard enough to bang it against metal time. "Not that way. Not the clean way." His voice came out in pieces, scraped raw. Rook pressed closer, then flinched away from a puddle filmed with fuel and old blood. His alert broke into uncertainty again. Mara dropped beside Vale, keeping her body between him and the open passage. "Roots," she said. "Give me roots, not fear." Vale stared at her like fear was the only language left. Then dragged breath through his teeth as another knock traveled through the deck behind him. It was not a call for help. It was a man closing distance. A shape crossed the far end of the engine space, just a dark cut through steam and red light. Mara pulled Vale down before he could cry out. The first hard impact struck a hanging panel behind them and rang through the compartment. Rook surged, checked himself on Mara's grip, then lost the scent line in the chemical wash rolling under the deck. Elias swore and hauled at Vale's good side. "We move now." "He knows something," Mara said. "He knows he's scared," Elias shot back. A second impact snapped sparks from a damaged bracket, and hot flecks skipped through steam above Rook's head. Rook ducked into Mara's leg, then lost the body scent entirely when Vale slipped in the same breath. Elias caught Vale under the ribs and took the man's full weight with a port grunt that made his own footing skid. The hunter was not rushing. He was pressing them out, making the space too expensive to hold. Mara put her mouth near Vale's ear, close enough to cut through the metal echo. "Three things: lower route, people, open deck." Vale's eyes focused for half a breath. "Lower compartment, crew might still be sealed in." He swallowed hard. Safe route was closed after the blast, then open, too open. His hand clawed toward the overhead, not up exactly, but toward the ship's skin. "Bridge wing, outside, lights can see, don't let them take us there." It was not enough to understand the plot. Good. Full explanations in a lower engine space usually meant somebody had stopped being afraid of dying. This was better, worse, real, and it still left Mara with nothing solid to trust. Mara got one arm under Vale and felt how much weight his injury stole from every second. He tried to help and nearly folded. Elias took more of him without asking, practical anger in the set of his jaw. "Fastest way is back to the open passage," he said. Vale bucked so hard they almost dropped him. "No, it was cleared, after." The hunter moved again, closer now, forcing them away from the shadowed pump housings and toward the brighter path Vale hated. Rook whined once, low and frustrated, nose working through diesel, blood, salt, chemical bite, and the living panic pressed between them. Mara chose the uglier angle, dragging Vale through a waist-high gap that scraped skin from her knuckles and slowed them badly. Every foot cost breath. Every delay gave the man behind them more room. The last impact hit a pipe brace close enough to shake rust into her hair. At the junction, Vale sagged against her and found one more broken sentence. "That's safe route," he said. It was cleared after the damage. Mara did not take the safe route. She stopped at the junction with Vale sagging between her and Elias well. And the pause cost them a second they could feel in their teeth. The passage ahead looked wrong in the small ways that mattered. A scraped deck edge through soot and standing water. A torn cable pinned up out of the way. A strip of emergency light still burning where everything around it had gone dark. Damage had chewed the lower engine spaces into heat, steam, and clutter. Yet this one path had room for a wounded man to be dragged through it. Too much room. Rook came up beside her and lowered his head toward the brighter passage, then pulled back with a low, uncertain sound. He gave her no answer, only doubt. Mara took that and added it to Vale's shaking weight, Elias's impatience, the hunter moving behind them, and the operators above. A visible path after a dirty break. Every other choice punished speed. Someone had made this one usable in one direction, and that direction carried the calm malice of a door left open by a man who knew fear would hurry people through it. A hard strike from behind turned the steam white for half a second. Elias stared past her shoulder, reading steel the way other men read print. "That should be blocked," he said. He touched the scraped edge with 2 fingers, then looked up at a buckled support above it. Panel came down hard enough to close this stiss. Somebody moved it. "After the damage," Vale whispered. "After, I heard cutting, dragging." Elias's jaw worked because the route was real, and that made the trap uglier. "It still gets us up faster." "Fast is not the same as out," Mara said. A metal strike came from behind them, closer now. From above, another sound answered it, a boot scrape on a landing they could not see. 2 directions. Herding, tight enough to let them feel choice, while stealing most of it. Then the bright path ahead spat a flash against the wall. A panel near Elias buckled inward, and a small rain of glass and rust dropped between him and the easy way. Vale tried to pull away from the brighter route and nearly took all 3 of them down. His eyes fixed upward through the ship, as if he could see daylight through the decks. "Bridge wing," he said. "Inspection platform, inspection clear. Outside line, lights can see it." He swallowed. "There may be crew below the old valve room. If they see movement there, they'll push them out." Mara heard the mistake in it, or maybe the lateness. Maybe it did. But the men on the ship had not killed him when they could have. They had pushed, opened, waited, and left a path a hurt engineer could survive long enough to follow. That changed the work in front of her. Extraction was too small a word. "We don't feed him to the bright route," she said. Elias looked from the passage to Vale and back to her Rin. "Then we climb?" The central ladder well waited left of the junction, half hidden behind a hanging curtain of cable and heat haze. It was narrow, vertical, and ugly, checked. It was also the only way that did not hand Vale into the prepared corridor. Rook stepped toward it, stopped, and looked back at the brighter route with his ears tight. Mara could work with uncertain. Certainty had a habit of arriving after the dead could no longer use it. And she had no interest in paying for that lesson twice. So, another impact slapped the wall behind them. A shadow moved at the far end of the easy passage, not advancing fast, just closing the option. The ship was being arranged around movement, one nudge at a time. Elias shifted Vale higher against his shoulder. "He won't make that climb clean." "Nothing about this is clean." Mara took Vale's other side, and felt the man's knees buckle under fear, as much as injury. The ladder well smelled of hot metal and salt, with a deeper wetness breathing up from below. Red light ran along the rungs and died halfway up, and leaf rings. Behind them, the hunter pressed close enough for Rook to bare his teeth without sound. Ahead, the better-lit route stayed open, patient as an invitation. Mara saw the whole board for one sharp second. Men above, hunter below, easy path bright, ladder well ugly. Vale alive, and terrified of the wrong direction. She had been thinking of him as a survivor to pull clear. That was what the ship wanted her to think. She tightened her grip on Vale and moved him toward the ladder well instead. "Up ugly," she said. Elias did not argue this time. Rook went first, hesitant but moving. The opened route remained behind them, still available, still wrong. And Mara understood the man shaping it was not merely chasing Vale. He was arranging him, one opened path and one forced refusal at a time. The ladder well punished every good intention. Rook went first because the space demanded it, then stopped 3 rungs up as heat rolled down the shaft and the red vertical light broke across his ears. Mara felt the whole line stall behind him, Vale's weight dragging sideways, Elias cursing under his breath. The hunter closing below, the upper deck still not theirs. The rungs were slick with salt and engine sweat. The walls sat too close to shoulders and elbows, turning every move into a shove against wet metal. Mara put one hand under Vale's arm and the other on Rook's harness. "Move ugly," she said. Rook climbed 2 more rungs, then froze as the shaft boomed around them. A hard crack hit the metal above, another answered from below, sound folding over sound until direction broke apart. Vale flinched so hard his boot slipped. His weight snapped backward into Mara, and her bad knee took the load before she could shift. Pain climbed fast and bright. She did not let it have her mouth. Her glove tore against the rung as she drove her shoulder into the wall, pinned Vale upright, and kept the whole stack from falling. The first Brine ledger man hit them from the maintenance side, not with a charge, but with a close, hard body check that stole space. He came in where the shaft opened into a narrow landing, low and controlled, forcing Mara to choose between protecting Vale and keeping the ladder line moving. Elias shoved Vale higher and turned into the man's shoulder before Mara could order it. Good instinct, bad timing. The landing was too tight for distance. Everything became grip, breath, balance, knee, rail. Mara caught the operator's wrist as it came for Vale's torn coveralls and drove it into the ladder frame. He twisted away without panic. Professional, good. He did not fight to win the whole shaft. He fought to stop their climb for 10 seconds. Vale's boot hammered empty air. Elias caught him by the back of the coveralls and paid for it when the operator drove both men into the rung stack. The sound left Elias in a flat gasp. Mara felt Vale's weight try to peel them all backward. And for 1 second, the ladder well became a fall with walls. A flash stuttered from somewhere below, and the shaft rang so hard, Rook barked once. Then snapped silent as the echo hit him back from 3 directions. His claws scraped uselessly against a rung. Heat and fuel stink thickened around him. His tongue showed, then vanished behind clenched teeth. His ears flattened until they almost disappeared against his skull. Mara felt the pulse in his neck go too fast under her fingers. His focus broke again, harder this time. Overload, not fear. Still costly. Above them, another shadow crossed the red light and kept going up, taking position while they were trapped managing damage. Push, Elias said, breath sharp. We can still beat them up. Mara wanted to. Every part of the climb told her that speed mattered. The open angle above them was sliding away, one boot scrape at a time. But Rook's body had gone wrong under her hand, rigid in the harness, head jerking between scent, vibration, metal echo, and human pressure. If she dragged him through it, he might move. And he might be useless when she needed him to read living stress again. She hooked her arm across his chest and forced him against the wall, giving him one pocket of stillness in the banging shaft. Elias took another hit on the landing and lost air through his teeth, still keeping Vale's shoulder from crashing into the rail. The rail tore skin from Elias's shoulder through the wet fabric, and his next breath came thin. Rook's harness strap cut across Mara's palm when she held him still, and the dog's ribs hammered under her hand like a trapped engine. The operator used Mara's second of care. He broke contact with Elias, retreated 2 steps instead of pressing fee, and looked past Mara to Rook before vanishing up the passage. Not fleeing, reporting without words. Mara felt the reed land colder than the pain in her knee. They had shown him what slowed her. Rook mattered. Rook cost her. Somewhere above, the route changed because of it. Mara, Elias said, we just lost the upper angle. I know. She got Rook breathing again by touch and pressure, not words. 2 fingers under the harness, palm flat to the ribs, hold until the shake turned into a working tremor. Vale sagged against the ladder, pale and sweating, one hand clamped around a rung as if metal could forgive him. Below Lee the hunter did not rush. Above, Brine Ledger did not waste movement. They had gained position because Mara had chosen the dog over the climb, and the choice sat in her chest like wet steel. Elias saw it too. His eyes kept cutting to a side passage half hidden behind a bent service panel. Air moved through it, cold compared to the ladder well heat. Too available and running, where a salvage man would want it to run. But there's another way, he said. Old flood service crawl. It will cut time. Vale made a broken sound. Another impact rang below, close enough for the ladder to tremble under their feet. Rook leaned against Mara's leg, still alive, still stressed, still not fully back. Mara looked at the side passage and hated how perfectly it waited. One route remained open too conveniently, cool air breathing through its dark mouth. And Elias was already seeing it as the seconds they had lost. The kind a guilty man could not leave behind. Elias did not wait for permission before he pulled the bent service panel aside. But he did wait for Mara's eyes. That mattered. The opening behind it was real, a low crawl with a lip of cold water. Old brackets along the left side and a service line running upward through the dark. Not a painted door to nowhere. Not a miracle. A salvage path, ugly and narrow, made for men who knew which parts of a ship kept breathing after damage. Air moved through it in small wet pulls, and Elias checked that first, not the darkness. Then he followed the bracket line with 2 fingers and kicked once at the lower edge where the panel had bent outward. It bypasses the jammed landing, he said. Comes out above the lower access, short of the bridge wing side. Vale shook his head before the last word finished. Changes the approach. Everything changes the approach, Elias snapped. A hard strike sounded below them, then another, closer, turning the ladder well into a drum. We stay here, they own the climb. Mara looked into the crawl and felt the trap shape around the truth of it. It would save time. That was the problem. Useful things could be staged too. Rook stood beside her with his chest still working too fast. But his eyes tracked the water and the dark without breaking. Stressed, functional, limited. Mara could use that. She could not trust it cleanly. Fastest route? She asked. Elias gave her the kind of look people saved for questions they thought insulted physics. Yes. Best route? He did not answer as fast. Guilt lived in that half-second foe. Not betrayal. Not stupidity. Just a man seeing trapped bodies in every delay and trying to pay old debts with speed. Mara accepted the shortcut because the ladder well behind them was closing. Rook needed space. And Vale could not survive a fight in a vertical shaft. She hated every reason. They pushed into the crawl, with Elias first, Vale between them, Mara behind, with Rook tight to her knee. Cold water swallowed her boot to the ankle, then halfway up the shin. It stole heat and balance at the same time. The ceiling forced her neck down. Her elbow scraped metal. Vale gasped each time the crawl narrowed, and his injured side brushed the wall. "Bridgewing," he said, words breaking against his teeth. "This brings us wrong. Too low, too exposed when it turns." "Save breath," Elias said. "Use it," Mara said. "Tell me the turn." Vale dragged air in. "Left bend, then up. If they hold the cross passage, we come out facing the line, not behind it." The shortcut worked, which made Mara trust it less. They moved faster than they had in the ladder well, dragged by water and pressure, but not stopped. The crawl angled under a trembling deck plate and opened into a lower service run, washed in thin, reflected red. Rook hesitated at the bend, nose low, then moved on without the full lock of a clean alert. Fuel stink sat in the stagnant water. A hard snap behind them hit metal, close enough to throw a ripple along the flooded floor. Elias heard it and drove harder. "They're above, we beat them, through, from." Mara heard something different. The boots overhead had not searched over. They had crossed, like men moving to a place they already expected to need. Her hand went to Elias's shoulder and held him back just long enough to make him feel her doubt. "They saw you push speed. They saw us lose time. They saw what you'd spend to get it back." His face changed in the low red light, anger first, then the hurt thing under it. Vale sagged between them and whispered, "Too low." That was all he had. It was enough to make Mara's knee tighten before the passage did. The bend forced them into a tighter crawl, where Elias had to go ahead or no one went. Mara let him go first, and the choice did more damage than she had meant it to. He knew the ship. She knew pressure. Neither skill cancelled the other, which was inconvenient as hell, in a space too narrow for pride. Rook squeezed through after Vale, ears tight but moving, claws ticking against metal above the waterline. Something scraped behind them at the service panel, a controlled shove that made staying impossible. The crawl spat them into a service pocket faster than the ladder well would have. And for one breath, Elias looked right. They had recovered minutes. Then Mara saw the geometry. The exit faced a cross passage washed in pale emergency spill. And beyond it, the upward route angled toward the bridge wing side, from the wrong side of cover. Brine Ledger was already there.
Not charging. Waiting. One operator stepped into view at an angle he should not have predicted, close enough to deny the turn, far enough to force them into exposure if they backed away. Another shadow held the higher line behind him. Elias stopped so suddenly Vale hit his shoulder. Mara felt the whole shortcut collapse into its real cost. Faster, yes. Worse, absolutely. The enemy had not guessed the ship. They had read the man who needed speed. The operator in the cross passage did not fire wild or rush the service pocket, is less than #0. 5 is greater than. He held the angle and made them spend themselves deciding. That was worse. Vale sagged against Elias, breathing in broken pulls, while the cold water from the crawl ran off all of them and spread over the deck in thin black sheets. The upward route beyond the operator bent toward a pale slit of outside air. Wind moved through it, stronger than it should have been this far inside the ship, carrying salt and a hard open deck sound that did not belong with lower metal. Rook tracked it with his head low, then shifted toward Vale, then toward the passage again. Movement pressure, not motive, is less than #0. 3 is greater than not truth. Mara took the cue and watched the operator's hands, his shoulders. The way he gave Vale too much room and gave her too little. He had a clean chance to put Vale down when Elias stumbled him forward. He did not take it. A hard flash cracked against the support beside Elias instead, tearing rust and paint into the air. Then the operator struck Elias, enough to turn the man sideways and keep Vale moving toward the pale air. Mara felt the truth move from idea into muscle. They were not protecting Vale from death. They were protecting him from placement. Is less than #0. 4 is greater than everybody on the deck seemed to know it, except the man himself. He's keeping him alive, Mara said. Elias heard it through his breathing and stopped trying to drive straight through the angle. That was the first good thing the shortcut had given them. He shifted Vale behind a bent support and used his shoulder to block the next push, not to win space, just to change the direction of it. Brine Ledger answered by closing from above. A second man came down the stair edge near the bridge wing approach, driving them away from the only covered corner and toward the brighter opening is less than #0. 4 is greater than. The outside wind grew louder with each forced step. Deck vibration changed under Mara's boots, from enclosed ship tremor to the thinner shiver of exposed platform metal. Vale saw it before she did. His whole body locked. "No," he said. "Not there." The word carried more terror than the men around them. Mara looked past his shoulder and caught the first view of the marker. A pale, wet line painted across the bridge wing inspection platform where the deck changed from sheltered access to open exposure. Damaged lamps shook over it. Beyond it is less than #0. 3 is greater than black water, flashed silver under distant official floodlights, still far enough to be useless and close enough to matter. The line was only paint, water, and timing. That was how professional traps survived first glance. The tempting move was there. Shove the nearest operator through the open angle, drag Vale past him, use the momentum. Get outside before the men above sealed the stair. Elias saw it too. Now, he snapped. We can break left. Mara had already felt what that would buy. It would move Vale closer to the marker line. Is less than #0. 4# is greater than. It would give Brine Ledger exactly what they had been feeding her since the lower engine spaces. Hurry. Fear. A bright path. A living man. In the wrong place. Rook pressed forward and then checked, one paw on slick metal, breathing hard. Eyes fixed on movement around Vale, instead of the men themselves. Mara caught the limited truth in that. The danger was not the man nearest her. It was the way all of them were turning Vale. She pulled Elias back with one hand and took the impact meant for his ribs with her own shoulder. Pain snapped down her bad knee. Is less than #0. 4# is greater than. The operator used the refusal to retreat upward 2 steps. Distance lost. Position lost. Worth it if the line stayed uncrossed. Above them, the men did not chase like killers. They adjusted around Vale like handlers of an object they could not afford to break. A burst of light jumped along the rail and killed the lamp over the marker, leaving the paint half lit and worse. No bright route, Mara said. It was not eloquent. It was enough. Elias looked at the marker again, then at Vale, and the old speed in his face changed into something harder. Is less than #0. 5# is greater than. We keep him inside the line, he said. Vale clawed at Mara's sleeve, with fingers slick from blood and seawater. If I cross it with them around me, later truth gets weaker, he said. Lights see a survivor moving with armed men near ship control. They won't know what was forced. He did not have the whole plan. He did not need it. The outside wind shoved spray through the broken access and flattened his words against the metal. Above the stair, the man who had given ground did not rush back. He waited, letting another route open toward the platform while the first one closed behind them. Is less than #0. 5# is greater than. Mara saw the patience in it, and with it the commander behind the pressure. Viktor had gained distance because she had refused the fast move. Vale stared at the wet marker line as if it were a ledge over deeper water. His boot slid once toward the paint before Mara caught him by the torn coveralls and hauled him back. Don't let me cross it, he said. Rook stood between Mara and the wind with his head low, tracking bodies, not intentions. And every body on that deck was now pulling toward the same painted line. The wind hit them as the route broke open. The bridge wing platform stood ahead, narrow and wet, and is less than #0. 4# is greater than, with the marker line shining pale across the deck under a damaged lamp. Beyond the rail, black water rolled under the first sweep of official floodlights, still distant, still late. Bright enough now to turn bodies into shapes. Vale saw the line and tried to fold backward. Elias caught him before he dropped, both men sliding on paint made slick by spray. Brine Ledger moved at once. A hard crack broke the lamp over the inner rail, and the sudden dark shoved everyone toward the brighter strip of paint. The men above closed one side. The man from the cross passage closed the other. Is less than #0. 4# is greater than, and the space between them became a chute. Then a third man stepped out from the bridge wing shadow, calm in the wind, not large, not loud. Just obeyed by everyone around him. Mara knew command when it changed the air. Viktor Hale did not point at Vale or explain anything. His eyes went once to Rook, once to Elias, then to Mara's knee, and only after that to the paint. He had watched. He had spent the ship learning what slowed them. Across, he said, barely raising his voice. The others adjusted, as if the deck had tilted under his feet. Elias shoved Vale behind a pipe frame and threw his shoulder into a half. Fallen service gate at the platform's inner edge. Left side is mine, he said, and made it true for 3 seconds. The gate shrieked under his weight, blocking the alternate cut around the marker. It was ship knowledge, not strength alone. He had seen which bent hinge would hold, if punished from the right side. One brine ledger operator hit the gate and drove Elias back into it. Metal bit into Elias's ribs. A second impact snapped the brace above him, showering wet rust over his neck. Is less than #0. 4# is greater than he stayed there, face white, boots slipping, buying Mara the only clean thing left, a narrower fight. Viktor used the other route. He caught Vale's sleeve, not the throat, not the wound, nothing that would make the survivor useless. A pull, a turn, a brutal control of balance, and Vale stumbled one full step toward the paint. His boot landed close enough that water jumped from the marker line onto his toe. Rook surged, with a hoarse sound, then checked hard, tired body shaking against Mara's grip. His eyes were not on Viktor's face. Is less than #0. 4# is greater than. They were on the shifting feet around Vale, the pressure line building toward the marker. Movement. That was all. That was enough. Mara trusted the limit because it was honest about what it did not know. Mara moved on the cue before it became thought. Her bad knee failed halfway into the push, not fully. Just enough to steal height and make the deck drop wrong under her. She turned the fall into angle, shoulder low, and drove herself between Viktor and Vale. The impact took her breath and slammed them both against the wet rail. Viktor did not grunt. Is less than #0. 3# is greater than he gave ground, like a man saving force for the next inch. His hand stayed on Vale's sleeve. Mara broke that hold by putting her weight through the space, not by chasing his wrist. And the sleeve tore instead of carrying Vale across. Vale went down on the safe side of the paint, palms sliding over the wet deck and stopping short by less than a hand's width. Rook lunged to block the next body and stopped short when Mara checked him with her hand. Shaking with the need to finish a fight he did not understand. Viktor saw that check. His mouth moved once, not a smile. Again, is less than #0. 3# is greater than Viktor. Did not look at Vale then. He looked at Mara's hand on Rook and at the way her knee refused to reset under her. He stepped on that timing. A brine ledger operator slammed the gate again, and Elias's brace jumped loose with a sound like the ship tearing open. Vale slid on his hip. One heel-crossing spray over the paint before Elias hooked the back of his coveralls and lost another breath. A burst of white glare skipped across the platform and killed depth. Rook gave one tired, broken warning, eyes fixed on feet driving Vale, not on faces. Mara heard the cue and chose the line instead of the man. The marker vanished under spray and came back under Vale's boot. No more than an inch of wet color between failure and the story Viktor wanted. He came closer, colder, using her knee, using the wind, using the exact second she had spent on Rook. Elias's gate buckled. He hit the deck on one knee and still kicked the lower brace back. Into place, before the operator could come through. It cost him. Mara heard the sound leave his mouth. The platform narrowed until there was no fight left except movement across one wet line. She let Viktor think he had read the last hesitation. Is less than #0. 4# is greater than. When he drove Vale toward the line with his shoulder and weight, Mara did not chase Vale. She stepped into the route itself. Pain lit her knee clean through, white and stupid. But the marker was under her boot now, and she owned that inch. Viktor hit her there. The rail slammed her back. Salt spray burst over her face. A hard impact struck the platform behind her and turned the floodlight glare into flying glass and water. She hooked one arm around the wet post, turned her body into a barrier, and forced Viktor's movement sideways instead of forward. No clean technique is less than #0. 3# is greater than no pretty finish. Just weight, timing, bad metal, and a refusal to give the deck the shape he needed. Rook's tired bark cut across the wind as another operator shifted toward Vale. Elias rose enough to block him with the broken gate and went down again under the hit. Mara used that sound, that bought second, and drove Viktor off the line. He fell to the platform edge hard enough to lose command of the men behind him. Vale stayed inside the marker. Alive. Not placed. What Viktor had come to build failed before the official floodlights reached the deck is less than #0. 5# is greater than. When the lights finally washed over the bridge wing, they found Mara on one knee, Rook shaking beside her. Elias half-pinned at the gate, Vale breathing on the safe side of the line. And Brine ledger bodies scattered in a scene that still looked dangerous enough to lie. The official floodlights arrived too bright and too late. They washed the bridge wing flat, turning wet steel, bodies, torn harness, and the pale marker line into shapes that looked simpler than they were. Mara stayed on one knee because standing would have been theater, and her knee had already voted against theater, is less than #0. 5# is greater than Rook shook beside her, ribs pumping, salt water darkening the fur along his chest. His harness had torn near one buckle. He did not alert. He did not point. He breathed, alive and spent, and leaned enough against Mara's thigh to make her put a hand on him. Vale lay on the safe side of the paint, curled around his own breathing, eyes fixed on the line he had not crossed. Elias was still half-pinned by the bent service gate, one shoulder jammed under a brace, jaw tight enough to crack. Official voices climbed the wind from below, sharp and controlled, calling for hands, status, survivors, is less than #0. 5# is greater than they had arrived to contain the mess after the only thing that mattered had already happened. The ship gave them nothing clean. Salt, fuel, blood, broken red lamps, dead deniable men. And one living engineer near a line that could still make the wrong story if anyone wanted it badly enough. The first official team came onto the platform with lights high and questions low. Mara kept her hands where they could see them and did not argue when. One man ordered her away from the marker. She shifted only far enough to keep Vale inside it. Is less than #0. 4# is greater than. That small move cost a bolt of pain up her leg and earned no understanding from anyone watching. Fine. Understanding was not the job anymore. Containment was. Officials checked pulses, kicked weapons away, secured wrists, shouted positions into radios, and built a perimeter over a dirty scene. None of it explained why the Aster Crown had been opened in the wrong places. None of it named who had paid Brine Ledger to move inside the response gap. None of it turned Vale into proof. Vale tried to speak once, lips blue with cold, and got only a torn sentence out. They needed me is less than #0. 3# is greater than then breath took the rest. An official leaned closer, hungry for sense. Mara looked at him and said, "Get him warm. Keep him inside the paint." It was all she had that would still matter in the next 5 minutes. From a radio at the rail came a broken line about the dark craft losing trace beyond the containment lights. No one on the platform answered it. Elias got free when 2 officials hauled the gate off his shoulder. He did not thank them. He sat against the rail, one arm wrapped around his ribs, staring at the marker line like it had personally offended him. Is less than #0. 4# is greater than. For a while he said nothing, which was better than the wrong apology. Then he looked at Mara. "You were slower," he said. His voice was rough, almost lost under the engines gathering alongside. That saved him. Mara did not answer right away. A clean reply would have ruined it. Elias swallowed and looked back at Vale. If I had dragged him through the fast route, he would have been standing where they wanted him. It was not praise. It was a correction made out loud, practical and ugly and worth keeping. Mara reached across the wet deck and checked Rook's harness with fingers that had, is less than #0. 5 hash is greater than started to shake, now that the fight had no use for them. The torn buckle held by one strap and stubborn luck. Rook turned his head and pressed his muzzle into her wrist. No certainty lived there. No answer. Just heat, breath, and the stubborn little fact of survival. Mara held on until his shaking slowed enough to feel like work instead of collapse. Gray dawn came behind the floodlights, weak and colorless. It showed the Aster Crown as she was, crippled, streaked with rust and spray. Her bridge-wing platform scarred, where bodies had fought over one painted line, is less than #0. 5 hash is greater than Viktor Hale, lay restrained near the rail, silent face turned from the light. He gave them no speech, no key, no clean name to carry ashore. The men around him had the same empty pockets and careful equipment that said, "Plenty, and proved less than people would want." Vale lived. Elias breathed through pain. Rook stayed on his feet only because Mara kept one hand under the torn harness. Official boots moved around them, making order, making records, making the scene look more settled with every passing minute. Mara knew how it would photograph. Is less than #0. 4 hash is greater than. A survivor. Armed strangers. A damaged vessel. Late lights. Too much water. Not enough context. She could not control that. She had controlled 1 inch of wet paint when it mattered. Beyond the floodlights, the Half-Open Strait still held a strip of black water where no official beam settled long. A second wake moved beyond the floodlights, faint and narrow. There and gone before the nearest official beam could hold it. Mara saw one officer turn toward the water. Then look back at the bodies, because bodies were easier to count than darkness, is less than #0. 4 hash is greater than. Mara touched the marker line with 2 fingers, then wiped salt and blood off on her pants. Rook leaned into her leg. Elias looked at Vale and nodded once. Dawn settled over the deck, gray on steel, and the official engines idled beside the gap.